Morning, everybody. This is John Kadlic from Parallel Path with the latest edition of Trail Talks. This morning, I'm with Natalie LaFranzo from the Linus Group, and we are in Boulder, Colorado on the Sanitas Valley Trail on a beautiful morning. Thank you for joining me today, Natalie. It's good to meet you in person.
Nice to meet you as well, John. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we might have to deal with some sunshine and some shadows, but it's all worth it. So maybe you could start out for the folks that don't know much about the Linus Group and what your specific role there is as VP of Strategy. And that'd probably be a good place to start.
That sounds great. So the Linus Group is a strategy and innovation consultancy focused specifically on health sciences, life sciences, and healthcare, with the goal of really guiding companies through any transformational processes that they have to make. That could be internal, getting internal buy-in on a new initiative, but most often we actually focus on external, reinventing a brand, launching a product, helping them navigate a new market, that sort of work.
Okay. Well, as you and I talked about before we got together this morning, it's pretty rare for us to have a PhD in chemistry who's a brand and marketing strategist. And so I'm just curious how that might provide you with a more unique perspective than more traditionally brought up strategists.
Absolutely. So I do have a PhD in chemistry. I knew towards the end of graduate school that I didn't want to stay in academia. I wanted to see the science that I was working on translated into impact a lot faster. And so I made the decision to leave the bench. The early part of my career was navigating a variety of different roles in small to medium-sized businesses, primarily in the oncology, precision medicine, genomics fields. Because they were small or medium companies, I got to wear a lot of hats. And so I've really done pretty much anything in the commercialization of science. So that could be marketing, business development, technical support, all the way through market development, branding, and corporate strategy. And when I made the choice to leave the client side of things and join Linus, I got to bring that client perspective to the work that we do. And so I now lead our strategy team, where I guide our strategists through the projects that we work on in the life science and healthcare fields.
So that is probably a really cool perspective to add to the mix. So one of the things that you've done recently, or your team has done with you, of course, as a seminal participant, is this study called Health 2035. And it's really interesting to hear some of the things that came out of that. So can you tell me a little bit about what inspired the study, how you did the study, and then maybe we can get into some of the takeaways and insights?
Absolutely. So our strengths are really in insight generation and scenario planning and thinking about the world in a way that's vastly different from where we are today. And so we saw an opportunity to do this with the future of healthcare, and we partnered with HSBC Innovation Banking to take a different approach to thinking about what the future might look like. We first talked to young physicians, so physicians who are 21 to 35, so that could be anyone who's committed to medical school through their residency or actually a practicing physician, and ask them what are their motivations, what are their drivers, what emotionally do they hope for in the future of healthcare? Because these are the folks that are actually going to be making a difference in how healthcare is practiced in 10 years. And so what we did was we spoke to them first, a small cohort. We got some really interesting insights, and then we expanded it to a survey of 1,000 young physicians. Got a very deep look at what the community is thinking about. And then we took that data, and we brought everyone together with, not all 1,000 of them, we brought together a group of 40 executives and leaders in the health and wellness space. And we said, okay, we have this data, we have the young physicians' vision for the future. What do we need as a community, as a leadership group to do to set the stage for them? And what did we hear? What surprised us? And so we had this exceptional visioning session. And then we brought all of that work together into the report that you mentioned. And we've been talking about that, and we've certainly shared some of the data, but there's more to share, and there's more conversations to be had, because the impact of this will only be realized if we fully commit to some of the change and the strategy that needs to happen to make Health 2035 a reality.
It's hard to look that far in the future, so I'm sure it was quite the challenge.
Yes.
And I know you're not trying to sort of predict the future in the classic sense, but what were some of the big takeaways from the study for the folks that are listening?
Yeah, you know, everyone really fixates on technology being at the center of the future of healthcare, and certainly tech is important, but what we found, and what wasn't surprising to us, given the way that Linus thinks, is that the emotional connections and the behavioral science is perhaps even more important. You know, whether it's adopting technology or making choices about where to practice and whether or not to even pursue medicine, that's all based on emotional drivers. And so I think we were most surprised to share with the community how much that reverberated with this young physician cohort.
And then was there some things that maybe surprised you or that were more provocative based on what your assessment was? Maybe what you thought was going to happen going in versus what you got coming out?
Yeah, one of the innovation territories that we explored with our executive leaders that we brought together in that visioning session is that people aren't thinking about lifespan any longer. They're thinking about health span, which is a very different way of characterizing how our lives are extended. It's no longer just about living longer, but it's about being able to enjoy those years and have a sense of security that you're doing everything you can to make sure that your health span is as good as it can be.
I think one of the most interesting phrases for me in the study was every company is a health company. And I'm just curious what inspired that and kind of what's behind that statement.
Yeah, sure. We do have a phrase at Linus that we use pretty regularly, which is that the future of health is the future of everything. And so it was, I think, inspired by that concept that regardless of where you are in the world, the health of your customers is a direct impact on your business success. And that could be very clearly delineated, for example, between CVS or Walgreens and the impact that they have on customers. But it could also be perhaps more tangential, which is if you're making a device, an electronic device, that very well could be used for an application that a consumer would use to track their health and wellness. And so what we like to do is we like to find all of those connections and think about, for companies, what can they do to position themselves to capitalize on that, make sure that they're prepared for the fact that health and wellness will completely permeate every industry, but also just acknowledge that and be thoughtful about it when they're doing their strategic planning and thinking about the product design or the way that customers will use their services.
Why don't we turn around so you can catch your breath and
Sure.
you can go downhill. This is a little bit more than I was expecting,
That's
but
okay.
I think we'll be okay. All right, I still got you. Okay.
Perfect.
So my experiences with a lot of clinically backed brands or medically focused brands is they tend to fall in love with the science.
They do.
And that's understandable. But when it comes to consumer marketing, and even to a degree, physician marketing and so forth, the science tends to lead a ton.
It does.
And it doesn't always resonate. So do you have any advice, or have you observed situations where people have successfully moved beyond the science, or maybe science is part of the message, but it's not the focal point?
Absolutely, yeah. So the first piece of advice, or the first way I think about this is it's always about impact. Data tends to be more about performance measures or look what we could do, but it's unclear perhaps what the application of that is. And so one of the things we always think about at Linus and that I've thought about in my career is what is the impact of that? What does that performance enable? And in our field, most often that's patient outcomes, and those are very, very powerful. But the other side of that is there often has to be some sort of financial impact that you're measuring as well, because we live in a society where that matters. And so thinking about how that data translates into impact, both on perhaps a patient side or a financial side, I would say would be the first place to start. And then the second part that is very important to Linus is the emotional connection. It's not just about giving people the impact as you would the data. It's what does this mean for me, for my family, for the people that I care about? And I think a really great example of that is actually the work that we did with Personalis. So at the time, I was on the client side, and Linus led the strategy. We took Personalis, which is a diagnostic company, from a very scientific company where they were early stage development, so they were presenting a lot of performance data, to a full-blown clinical diagnostics company that was going to make an impact in the way patient treatment decisions were made. And so if you look at the Personalis of today, the major brand architecture is around cancer is personal and how all of their products fit into the personalization of the cancer journey and providing patients and their clinicians the confidence to make treatment decisions along the way. And that's very different than where we started, where it was talking about parts per million detection and what volume of blood you needed, because those matter certainly, but the impact, the emotional connection to the impact is really about the patients and their cancer journey.
So talk me through that just a little bit more, because some of that is maybe hard at first blush to convince scientists, as one yourself,
Yes.
to sort of think beyond that. So were there certain techniques or conversations that got people to buy into something like you're talking about versus being focused on parts per million?
Yes.
How'd you get over the hump?
Yeah, we do that two ways. The first one is by primary market research. So we talk to the end users, people in the ecosystem, whether those are the clinicians themselves or sometimes it's even caregivers. What would this mean for you? And we bring those insights then into a room with the leadership teams, who often are either technically trained themselves or are operating in a very technical environment. And we have to go through a process of opening minds sometimes and opening hearts on some levels to, what you're doing matters so deeply to these people. And when you have leadership teams who are open to having those conversations and understand the big picture and how this strategy can really impact their success, those co-creation sessions, as we call them, are really phenomenal. And we usually walk out of the room with a strong story about the company. And that's the foundation for all the work we do.
Those are really good techniques, because that can be hard. So again, I'm talking to a scientist. And I know one of the things you're personally passionate about is there's a lot of industry talk about maybe less people being interested in science and people fleeing the field. And maybe that's true, or maybe it's not true. So, what's your point of view on that?
Yeah, it's very timely that you bring this up. There was a headline in Nature last month that said, I think it was after so many years, nearly 50% of PhDs quit science. And I think it was intended to be provocative, but the sentiment behind it was so inaccurate. So it was actually trying to talk about a really impressive longitudinal study that was conducted and was published in Higher Education. Two cohorts of many hundreds of thousands of scientists who were publishing in academic peer-reviewed journals. It tracked them, a cohort from 2000 and a cohort from 2010. When did they stop publishing? And so they looked at their publication patterns, which is a great data set to leverage. The methodology is very interesting, but the key takeaways of it, that people are leaving science if they stop publishing, is inherently flawed. There are scientists, chemists in particular, as is important to me, in fields across health, wellness, technical industries that are contributing beyond publications. Publications are just one way, it's one currency, if you will, of contributing to the field. And so to minimalize the impact that those scientists are having by saying they're quitting science is frustrating. And actually, I give a talk called Can We Stop Calling Them Non-Traditional Careers? Because when you look at the career paths of all the scientists that are trained, there's not enough academic faculty positions for them to take. And so it is more common for scientists to leave academia and to contribute to the world in a variety of ways, whether that's politics or law, to go on and become an astronaut or lead a Fortune 500 company. Roz Buer is a great example. She was COO at Starbucks, CEO of Walgreens Boots Alliance. You would not consider her to have failed in her career, but perhaps she could be coined as quit science.
Or you could become a brand strategist.
That's correct.
That's right. Well, maybe as we're kind of wrapping things up, I'd love to know what's maybe one thing you do for your own personal health and wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a very intense, high-energy person who loves to work hard and contribute to something that I'm passionate about. And so I've had to really build in a mindset that rest is a productive thing. It's been very hard. But once I adopted that, I could feel the balance of my life, and I could feel physically, mentally that I was able to contribute more fully. And so something that I'm very passionate about is rest, which maybe seems funny, but it's true. It's very easy to get caught up and to embrace, grind culture, and that everyone should be working as hard as they can. And certainly if you're passionate about something, put your energy behind it, but don't forget to take a break. It's very healthy to rest.
That is terrific advice, and I'm a kindred spirit of yours. I am a little bit hyperactive and like to be busy. I don't relax very easily.
Yes.
So maybe you could give me some tips and tricks sometime.
Happy to.
On how to get rest into the fold. So, well, I appreciate you taking time to have a conversation with me and to get out on the trail. It's a beautiful morning.
Beautiful.
And also appreciate all of you tuning in. It was nice to see you, and we'll see you out on the trail here again sometime soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, John.